For those who know what's right. For those wedded to the machines in their bedrooms, their studios, their best friend's garage or basement. For those who negotiate with the system every day to make time for the music that matters. For those who get in debt to fund the fight against the mundane. For those who stay true to their cause even in the face of income and fame through compromise. For those who feel the power of every beat. For those who keep their minds open. For those who encourage and support those pursuing their personal dream. For those who sacrifice relationships to make sure the music is heard. For those for which the music is a lifetime, not a pastime. This is Bass Agenda.
Hi, how you doing? Welcome to Bass Agenda. Another packed show for you this month. Something a little bit different in part one for you too. Earlier in the year I was approached by Dr William Proctor, an old school electro fan who's now starting to write a book on the history of this fantastic genre of music that we all love, particularly looking at the early days, the influences and the influence of electro. My most recent conversation with him forms most of part one of this show, along with some tracks that are important to him and important to the book so far as well. Kicking off the show, seeing as we've got a legit professor on the show as a guest, with Professor X, one of my favourites, and as it turns out, one of his as well.
Professor X, I am here, coming from my creator, D to D, D-A-T, master, emulator, conceived in beta planet by DJ unknown. DJ Slip was on the mix when I came to be known. Professor X is a scientist who studies all the music. If a guy grabs a girl, he can surely get into this, cause computers that we use are so simple to create. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
In the second part of the show, pleased to welcome back for the third time, I think it is now, a good friend of the show, the amazing ADJ, has put together an hour's worth of electro memories for us. Really cool old school mix, 21 tracks rammed into an hour. Something to look forward to. First bit of chat you're going to hear is between me and Dr Proctor. First up, setting the scene, a little bit about what he's trying to do. Then we'll get to know him, check out some tracks, find out a bit more about how you can get involved, and a lot more besides.
In the UK, obviously, where I'm based, the history of dance music at the moment goes from Northern Soul through to jazz funk, then leapfrogs completely over electro to rave music, Detroit techno.
Yeah.
Then we have house, jungle, drum and bass, grime, all else in between and beyond. But plenty of rave artists clearly emphasise the profound role that electro played in inspiring them to make music. So Dave Clark, Norman Cook or Fatboy Slim, Liam Howlett of The Prodigy, all talk about electro as foundation and influences. So in a sense, this project, or the book that I aim to write, kind of operates as a kind of historical revisionism. So I think it's massively important that electro pioneers are given due credit for what came after. And what's interesting is electro is the precursor to Detroit techno, for example. So although Juan Atkins is rightly seen as the godfather of Detroit techno, or at least one of them, with Derek May and Kevin Sanderson. It started off in electro synth pop group Cybertron, and I guess the tracks Clear and R9 are undoubtedly electro tunes. So I don't think it's provocative or contentious to suggest that electro provided the foundations for Detroit techno, but the history of hip-hop and electronic dance music usually skim over these connections. You know, one of the people that I interviewed, Kurt Bagley, who's also I guess we call him an electro artist from the UK called Scape One, who I'm sure many of your listeners have heard. So he pointed out to me that Cybertron also drew heavily from UK synth pop, and especially Ultravox. Now, this is something that I wasn't aware of. So to offer an example, the track Mr. X from Ultravox's 1980 album, Vienna, clearly echoed, according to Kurt, in Tron's 1981 track Alleys of Your Mind, which is interesting because it comes the year before Planet Rock, but I'm not sure if it's electro per se, but it's definitely inspired by UK synth pop, especially Ultravox. And on the B side of that record, Cosmic Rain Dance, Cybertron borrowed the bass line from Electricity by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, which is a faster version of Kraftwerk's Radioactivity. So what we have here, there's lots of borrowing back. It's like a multicultural sonic echo chamber, exchanging cultural fluids across transnational borders and territories. So I've always been fascinated by electro in the sense that once you learn more about it, to try and find this one, to pinpoint this one place where this is the first electro track is really, really difficult to do, and impossible almost, because you've got all of these exchanges of cultural fluids going all over the and a lot of that's to do with not just the way technology moves because of electronic music, but the way technologies move to allow us to be what some people call a global village, for good or bad. And so music can travel, and music. So even seeing electro as something that emerges from black culture is really difficult, because you had Latin people who were the B-boys and stuff like that. If you look at electro, yes, you've got Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, but you've also got Arthur Baker and John Roby, who are pioneers of this sound, if you like. And we could also consider Latin hip hop, but what we call today freestyle. I guess in broad strokes, and listeners, please email me if you disagree or if you've got another viewpoint. Freestyle is a subgenre of electro, but instead of rapping or vocoders or even an instrumental, we have singing. So tracks like Shannon's Let the Music Play, Dina's On the Upside, both from 1983. Good illustrations of freestyle. But we would have described them as electro at the time. And in fact, both tracks were on Street Sounds albums, Crucial Electro True and Electro True, respectively. And Let the Music Play by Shannon is often cited as the first freestyle track, but I think there's a case to be made that it's Planet Patrol's Play at Your Own Risk from 82, which is kind of what's interesting about that track is that's the track that was going to be Planet Rock until they decided that they were going to well, in fact, Arthur Baker explains that they recorded that in case they got a lot of grief over using the Kraftwerk riff from Trans-Europe Express. So really what you have is Planet Rock Part 2, but instead of rapping, we have Planet Patrol singing on it.
It's an amazing track. I love that track.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Play at Your Own Risk. Yeah,
Play at Your Own Risk is fantastic. It's
amazing.
So in 82, I think what's interesting is Planet Rock kind of births electro hip-hop at the same time that Planet Patrol gives birth to what comes to be known as freestyle. But I don't see the distinctions between electro and freestyle to be that clear-cut. It's these are. But that's the way genre works. We love putting things into neat boxes. We love categories. And that's really to help the company sell stuff as much as it is to help us understand it.
Yeah, definitely.
But the distinctions between electro, freestyle, British synth pop, electronic dance music, hip hop, funk music, they're not that clear cut. No. They're all part of this Venn diagram of intersection and convergence.
Definitely.
well, I was born in Sunderland, so in the northeast, and really born on a council estate, so we lived in poverty for most of our lives, really. But then we moved down to a place called Hendon, which was meant to be better, but was right next to a council estate anyway, so a lot of poverty in the area, a lot of working class. I mean, it really is a working class area. And interestingly, my musical upbringing, if you like, I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people, but you kind of like what your mum and dad like at first. So it was like things like Queen, rock music, that type of stuff. But also black music. So my dad would have Otis Redding, and he would have Wilson Pickett, and that type of thing. So it was in 1984. I was 10 years old. I was born in 1974. And I was watching Breakdance the movie, or Breaking as it's called in the States. That was my first introduction to, well, hip-hop culture, really.
Yeah.
But it was even though that film now, it doesn't really get due credit for what it did. It's a very important film, even though it is dated, but it doesn't seem dated to me because I've been brought up with this. I watch this film every year or two, and I have done since that age.
Yeah.
It just brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
And there's just a bit in the film where Turbo, and the character Turbo, is working in a 7-Eleven with Ozone, and he's asked to go outside and sweep the floor. So he does, he goes outside. And then we hear the first strains of the Tour de France remix from the B-side of the 1983 12-inch. And Turbo starts breakdancing with a broom. And this music comes in, and it's like, it's really difficult to get across to students when I lecture on things like this about how different this sounded at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, up until that point, it was really live music that I'd heard, so, guitar-based music, and not really much electronic music. And then this, I can't really explain how it impacted me, but it sounded like something from space.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a real big connection to electro, is this idea of science fiction being future music, as some people call it.
Yeah, yeah.
And seeing Turbo moonwalking, and even though he does a magic bit with the broom where he's got his hands above them, you can see the string. So it's not the best production in the world, but for a 10-year-old, it was just like, what is this? This is just another world.
Yeah.
And later in the film, well, just at the end of that scene, you've got two guys from electro rock, as they're called, and there's the term electro, right?
Yeah.
And they come and kind of challenge Ozone and Turbo to a battle, and they turn up at the Radiotron in the film, which is a real place in LA called the Radio. It's where, and I interviewed David Storrs, who did the track Reckless. He was the one who did the production and the music. Yeah. Love Taylor did the scratching. And Ice-T did the vocals.
Yeah, amazing.
What's interesting about that track is it's not in the film. And the reason being is Dave Storrs was asked to produce this after they'd done test screenings of the film, and they said, we don't have a rap song on the soundtrack. David Storrs did was he took some of the music that was already in the battle scene in the Radiotron, and he kind of developed it a bit further. So if you watch the film, you can hear strains of the beat of what would be Reckless. But it's just when you're in that club, the energy in that film is palpable. You really feel that there's something at stake here, and it's it all boils down to who's the best dancer.
Yeah, brilliant.
And of course, Ozone and Turbo get beat the first time, but the music is what's really important. You've got Ice-T rapping over beatbox by Art of Noise when we go. I'm not sure if we would call that an electro track. Debatable. There's, I'm sure listeners will think, well, of course it is, and other people say, well, no, it's not. Just have an 808 or whatever. But there's kind of this futuristic sense of the music.
It's got that vibe to it, isn't it? I think it does. You recognise as electro,
Yeah, it does have that vibe. So it's a very important film, and we just got bits of cardboard out on the street corner and tried to emulate this, the breakdancing, and we were terrible, but we got quite decent for the time. We were 10 years old, and what happened was we were invited to do a school performance because we were doing it in school. So at the beginning of assembly one Friday, me and four other friends got up on stage, and did a breakdance demonstration, if you like, to the dulcet tones of Ollie and Jerry singing "Ain't No Stopping Us."
Oh yeah.
Breakdance soundtrack. So at that point, I'm not really sure that I was separating the differences between electro, rap, and other songs from the breaking soundtrack, which are funk-based, electro-funk, I guess, and also freestyle, like "Heart of the Beat" by 3V.
Yeah.
So that's where it begins. And then there was a few people in the neighbourhood who were a little bit older than us, and they started to introduce us to the Street Sounds Electro compilations.
Right, okay.
And so people started to buy 12 inches of tracks that were on the Electro. So big ones at the time would have been Alna Fish by Hashim.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them, which is for me, hasn't dated one bit. Yeah, it's an incredible tune. And that's when we started to... when one of my friends bought Juice by the World Class Wrecking Crew, and you had the graffiti on the cover, and Daryl Davis cover, who did the covers for the World Class Wrecking Crew and Unknown DJ as well, because they're closely related. In fact, Unknown DJ was a member of the World Class Wrecking Crew of DJs. That's what's important about all these electro tunes, is a lot of these people were DJs.
Yeah.
And they started off that way. And of course, Dr. Dre was in the World Class Wrecking Crew, and he seems a little bit embarrassed about that history. I've spoke to a few electro heads who talk about the film Straight Outta Compton, and just the kind of they've kind of brushed away the World Class Wrecking Crew connections. When you see Dr. Dre in the nightclub spinning discs, he's not dressed like he was in the day. Which, well, back in the day, we thought that they looked like pimps or something like that. But it turns out they were inspired by Prince.
Yeah,
so you can see a lot of connections here with funk and other types at the time.
So where did you see the movie breaking? Was it on the TV, or was it somebody had it on tape or something? Or
it was VHS.
It was a VHS. Yeah.
From a dodgy dealer in our area who he had a proper store, but none of his videotapes were originals. They were all copies, and he lasted for many years before he was arrested.
Yeah.
I mean, they came from him in the end. So it was VHS, and we just kept renting it out over and over again. And then we copied it ourselves with video recorders back to back. Yeah. We didn't even have SCART leads then. We had so many different leads.
Yeah. Good old days.
It was really complicated, but it was something that we just had on permanent rotation. And Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo came out about 6 months later.
Yeah.
They were both the same year, I think.
Yeah, they were close together for sure,
Yeah, and of course the second one is a different story altogether. It's interesting but it's not the same as the first one. Will always hold a special place in my heart. I won't have anyone dissing it.
d'Azur et Saint-Tropez. Tour de France, Tour de France. Seul et les Pyrénées. Tour de France, Tour de France. Dernière étape, Champs-Élysées. Tour de France, Tour de France.
DJ's task was just to play records. What more could you ask? But then came remixes, scratching and cuts, which was too much for many. Drove some DJs nuts, but the DJ named Love has reigned supreme as the turntable wizard of the hip-hop scene. So listen to him, check him out, but remember this: when the glove's on the wheels of steel, he's reckless. This high-powered music is truly unique as the glove cuts the rhythm to the hip-hop beat. He moves like a madman as he spins his disc. He's the number one scratcher on the DJ list. He's reckless. Now I've seen DJs, too many to name. Some gain recognition and even fame. But when you talk of MCs, Ice-T is the best. And when you talk of DJs, forget the rest. Gloves reckless.
And it's like you say when you're talking to your student. I mean, I have this with my daughter. You know, the idea that you're hearing something for the first time, a sound, a type of sound, and a type of music for the first time, is just mind blowing. People don't get that now, because there is nothing new anymore, really. I mean, there is and there isn't, but yeah, the idea that drum machines and synthesizers had never been heard before, really, in that same way. That's what excites. That's what I've always. I think that's one of the main reasons I do Bass Agenda, because I just love that, talking to people who were there when things were fresh and.
Yeah, and it's the same with. I know that Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force is often cited as the first electro track, but that's not actually true. It's the first electro track that has rapping in it.
Yeah,
but when people heard that for the first time, it was so new that some people despised it. And as I spoke to the UK DJ Greg Wilson, who kind of introduced electro into the nightclubs in the north of England. And he said when he bought Planet Rock in Manchester, the guys in the shop were actually laughing because it was so unique and so novel. Yeah, that people didn't really know what to do with it.
Didn't know how to react.
Now it's one of those tracks that's Rick Rubin said it changed everything. Before that, hip hop was really about. So I think of something like Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. It has live music. It has live bands. Kind of covering Good Times by Chic. Not sampling, because sampling didn't exist, and that's another myth about Planet Rock. A lot of electro heads will know this, but Planet Rock doesn't sample Kraftwerk. What they actually do is John Roby plays the main riff from Trans Europe Express, and the drum beat is the pattern is emulating Numbers by Kraftwerk from the Computer World album, but it's programmed on a Roland 808 by someone who is unknown, someone that Arthur Baker and John Roby saw an advert in a newspaper, brought him into the studio, he programmed the beat, they put it onto tape, and he left, and they've never heard from him again.
No credit or anything. Wow.
No royalties. They did try and find him, but they only knew his first name, and so there's sampling technology wasn't there yet. So what Planet Rock did was it did away from using live bands and basically disco instrumentals. To create something new, and God knows where we'd be now if it wasn't for Planet Rock.
Oh yeah, game changer, absolutely. So, but we'll get into more sort of tracks and that in the moment. I was just curious to say, from those origins of breakdancing on cardboard on a council estate, how did you get into education and...
It came a lot later.
Right.
It came a lot later. I joined the Royal Navy when I was 16 years old. So I was in the Royal Navy for 4 years, which was probably the most traumatic and hellish time of my life.
Right.
And so when I left the Royal Navy, I went to do A-levels. And so I did a degree in English, but then I was working in call centres. And it was when I was around the age of 30, I thought, I don't want to be doing this all my life. I don't want to be just moving from one shit job to another. So I went back to university and I did a degree in film studies.
Right, okay.
And then I moved on to a PhD programme and finished that only in 2014. So, and then started work at Bournemouth University, where I am now, and been looking at popular culture in general. So before doing the Electro project, what's really interesting is it seems like I'm trying to please the younger me. So a lot of my work is focused on stuff that I loved when I was a kid. So I've got a book out on Star Wars. I've written about Star Trek, those types of things. So I've written about fan cultures. These were all, and science fiction as well, which was all a big part of growing up.
Yeah.
Now Electro, it's kind of like my expertise or my specialism in academia is related to what I loved when I was a kid.
Wow, that's not too bad, is it? That's fantastic. I didn't realise you'd written a book on Star Wars, man. That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool, but I've done so much work on Star Wars now that Star Wars will always mean a great deal to me because of what it meant to me as a child.
Sure.
But I wanted to move on to something different.
Yeah.
And when I found out that Electro hadn't been, or it was often sidelined in the history of hip-hop, and there hasn't, up to date, there's not been a robust and sustained history of the Electro subgenre as it emerged in New York in the 80s. But it also rapidly spread to other areas, so like Detroit, Boston, Los Angeles, Miami.
Yeah.
Artists like Man Parrish, John's Own Crew, Planet Patrol, Cybertron, World Class Wrecking Crew, Egyptian Love, Unknown DJ, Arabian Prince, 2 Live Crew, Megatron, Dynamix 2. I'm just pulling these out.
So many.
Yeah, they should all be celebrated as pioneer of hip-hop and the many subgenres of electronic dance music that followed.
So listen very closely as the glove goes down. He cuts like a razor to the big beat sound. Dave's laying down a groove that we know you'll like, with the glove on the turntables and Ice-T on the mic. We're reckless.
This is Bass Junkie, and you're listening to Bass Agenda.
This is no ordinary life. There are no ordinary people. This is a quiet revolution. On an urban satellite, where the streets are locked, but there's always room for extraordinary dancing in a solitary life. Dancing in the heart
Yeah, so we could talk about the term itself, electro.
Yeah, let's do that.
So in many ways, it's applied retroactively. So Cosmo D of Nucleus, when I interviewed him, he told me that as far as he was concerned, Nucleus were making funk tunes. So it's not even hip hop. On the West Coast, Egyptian Lover told me it was simply hip hop. But nowadays, old school electro is viewed as distinct from hip hop, which I think is a mistake. I mean, it's worth noting that the term hip hop was not originally a term for rap music. It was a term employed to describe the culture.
Yes.
The 4 elements being DJing, MCing, or rapping, graffiti, b-boying and b-girling, or breakdancing in UK vernacular. So hip-hop music at the time wasn't just about rap.
No.
It would have been about electro, it would have been about Latin hip-hop or freestyle. And Man Parrish explained to me that he thought that at the time, rap hijacked the concept of hip-hop, which that unfortunately meant that the diversity and inclusivity of hip-hop music has, over time, it's had its goalposts moved inwardly. So prior to the commercialization of hip-hop, so what I mean by that is a commodity to be bought and sold. Hip-hop as a term was more encompassing, more sonically diverse, and certainly more eclectic. And I found a quote from Africa Bambaataa, which I thought was interesting. And he said that people have used hip-hop in a lot of ways that cause a lot of mind problems. They use the word wrongly. They use it to mean a part instead of a whole. Like many of these radio stations say they're hip-hop, they're playing hip-hop. I go to these stations and these so-called program directors don't know jack crap about hip-hop culture. You know rap to a certain extent. But I question them. I say, where's your go-go, your hip house, your electro funk, your R&B and soul? They get real quiet. So hip-hop was a massive umbrella music. And, you know, hip-hop was a remix culture in a sense. They weren't making music at the beginning. What they were doing, they were using break beats and all of that stuff. And they were playing disco music. And, you know, there's this argument that disco and hip-hop developed separately, but it's just a fiction. It's not true. They played disco music. Bambaataa did. Kool Herc did. But what's really interesting about disco is in the nightclubs downtown or uptown, I always get confused, uptown probably, we had a DJ called Walter Gibbons. Now he's a DJ who's white and he's gay. He was mixing between the breaks with as much, if not more technical precision than Grandmaster Flash 5 years before him. Now, I'm not trying to take away credit from Flash. He introduced how to scratch and how to mix and all of that. But just the idea that disco and hip-hop, or that the Bronx was isolated from the rest of New York, is nonsense. And I asked Cosmo D, the question I asked him was, were you aware of what was going on in the Bronx? Because he's from Brooklyn. And he says, one of the biggest myths about hip-hop's origin story is that it was all just isolated in the Bronx. He said it was everywhere by 75, 76. And Cosmo D was a DJ at the time, and he was rocking parks in the Brooklyn area. And I asked him what was the biggest track, what was the favourite track of everyone. He said, Love Is the Message by MFSB, massive disco tune. So disco tracks had breaks in them. DJs in places like Paradise Garage. I mean, I wouldn't say Studio 54. Studio 54 is when disco starts to become commercial. And you get Saturday Night Fever and the Bee Gees and the Disco Sucks movement. So disco's been really maligned. Disco is massively important for hip-hop. Disco is massively important for electro.
What's up, y'all? This is Paris the Black Fool of the Detroit Grand Poobahs, and you're listening to Bass Agenda.
And I know we've spoken about this offline as well, but I mean, I think any music, but electro does attract purists. You know,
Yes.
there are people who are really, really furiously loyal to one origin story, like the Kraftwerk story being the main one. But as we've been saying, there's so much more.
Kraftwerk are really important, but to call them the fathers of electro is to do a disservice to other people. I think. Now, I'm not trying to say it before people start shouting at me online or anything. I'm not trying to say Kraftwerk are not important. Kraftwerk are massively important, but electro and hip hop in general has a lot of parents, more parents than would be biologically possible to conceive a child.
Yeah.
So, but I think what's important to understand is the term electro was not used to describe what we might call electronic or synth-based hip-hop in 1982 when Planet Rock came out, when Man Parrish's hip-hop bebop came out.
Yeah.
I mean, even Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 Scorpio, which is a banging electro track that really doesn't get a lot of attention mainstream. By the time David Toop released a book in 1984 called Rap Attack, really seminal book, one of the first, in fact, probably the first book on hip-hop.
I've not read it.
He's using the term electro. So by 84, that term's established. DJ Greg Wilson tells me that when he was playing electro, they used to call it electric funk, then shortened it to electro because of Morgan Khan's Street Sounds compilation series, and a song called Electrophonic Funk as well. But even then, electro wasn't a new term in 1983. Bambaataa claims to have coined the term electro funk. There are other examples that arrived earlier. So, for example, someone pointed out to me on the Electro Appreciation Group on Facebook that Yellow Magic Orchestra's Firecracker 12-inch has the term electro wave on the cover. So I guess that's a portmanteau of electronic and new wave because we're coming in the post-punk period.
Yeah.
Kurt Bagley told me that Kraftwerk's Ralph Hooter employed the term electro pop in 77, thereabouts. But there are other songs that include electro in their titles, especially from the label KPM, who produced so-called library music.
Oh, yeah.
1950s onwards. So Ron Geeson's 1972 album's called Electro Sound. There's loads of tracks with electro something in the titles. So the term was certainly in circulation prior to the Street Sounds electro versions.
As we've said before, it's a very cool word.
It is a cool word.
It's a very cool word. You can see why people have. I mean, even in recent times, people have hijacked it. You know, EDM and some of this other stuff as well. In terms of the book, what you obviously you're in the early stages, I suppose, really. But I mean, you've interviewed a good few people already. How did you start? I mean, I don't actually know how I know you emailed me, but I don't know how you found it. How you found me? Actually, I'm interested to know that.
There's a Facebook page of academics about music and subcultures, and I went on there and said, "This is what I'm interested in doing. If anyone can point me towards any literature where people do talk about electro, that would be great. Also, if there's anyone from back in the day who were involved in this scene, whether you were a musician, whether you ended up, whether you were a b-boy, whether you were breakdancing on street corners, whether you just bought the records, please email me and we can have a chat." And it exploded.
Wow.
People would just come out just saying those were the foundations for my youth.
Fantastic.
I was breakdancing, and I'm talking about all over the UK.
Yeah.
So people from as far as Dublin, London, Plymouth, Portsmouth, obviously up north, London. Someone put me in touch with the Covent Garden breakdancers from London who were active in the scene. So the first thing that I find out is this is not as isolated as I thought in the north at all.
No, far from it. Yeah.
And what happened was there was a list of some people were saying you should speak to this guy, and one of them was you should speak to Andy Barton from Bass Agenda. And then what I did was I started to ask a few questions, and then found it on Bandcamp and ordered a few 12-inches from
Yeah,
them.
you did. Yeah. Oh, nice one. Yeah, cool. No, I can't believe I'd never asked you that before. Yeah. No, that's really cool. So far you've interviewed
Man Parrish, Unknown DJ, David Stores, Egyptian Lover, Cosmo D from Nucleus, Kurt Bagley, Scape One, and Bill Klein, also known as Bass Junkie. Probably your listeners know both of them.
Yeah.
These two people have been not just supportive, but they answer questions on Facebook Messenger all day, every day.
Yeah.
Almost to the point that I think they're enjoying the conversation as well.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
But I want to give a massive shout out to Kurt and Phil to say without them, I wouldn't be where I am. They've pushed me into different areas that I didn't know.
Yeah,
so one of those areas, and I know this is a track we're going to play, is was Dog a Donut by Cat Stevens. So my first response was furrowed eyebrows and saying, what? Now, I love Cat Stevens. Tea for the Tillerman is one of my favourite albums. It's fantastic. But it's certainly not electro, is it?
No, far from it.
The song Was Dog a Donut is perhaps the first electro funk tune, and it comes before Parliament and Funkadelic. And I say first with quotation marks, everyone. I'm saying it's just, and it became this, it's so unknown in the histories of dance music and electro. And I found this quote online, which really blew my mind. And it's from rave pioneer Frankie Bones. So he says that, as history goes, Was Dog a Donut is not recognised as one of the most important electronic records ever made. But on this 1977 release, we have the prototype electro track. We have a timeless classic here, Moog eruptions and electronic drum programming, which arrived 5 years prior to the Roland 808. And the commenter says it has a synth effect that sounds like a barking dog. So straight away I'm thinking of hip hop bebop and the barking dogs in that. Sequencer that Mr. Pulse defined a groove, a wormhole into the future of electronic funk. It was the first draft of the blueprint needed for electronic music to come of age. And without Kurt and Phil, I would not have known that. And it's also been covered by Jelly Bean on his 1984 album. I can't remember the title now. Oh, yes, I can. It's called What Upski. And then we have this electro tune by Salsa Smurf, which is quite... It's not 130 beats a minute. It's about 90 beats a minute. It's quite slow. But what it basically... It was on Tommy Boy Records as well. So what the track does is it mixes Was Dog a Donut by Cat Stevens with Kraftwerk's Trans-Europe Express and creates something new. So again, just like Ultravox, Detroit Techno, all these things, you have this... I like to look at it as kind of a matrix, with all these influences and inspirations feeding into each other.
This is Scape One. These are the lost signals of the bass agenda.
I know a lot of people talk about the 1960s, about this period of innovation with things like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and James Brown. But I think, and this is not my argument, this is an argument made by Tim Lawrence and Jeremy Gilbert, who run a podcast called Love is the Message, which is about music and counterculture. So shout out to Tim and Jeremy for that podcast, which is my favourite podcast. Their argument is the 1970s is the greatest decade for musical innovation. And you haven't just got electronic music, you've got all sorts going on. I mean, New York, just in New York only, it's a melting point of musical genres, old and new.
Yeah.
I mean, and all around the country, so funk and soul continues to evolve. You've got Sly and the Family Stone, you've got George Clinton's Pop and Funkadelic, Stevie Wonder's Purple Patch. You've also got the introduction of the commercial 12-inch single. The first one being 10% by Double Exposure. So that was released in 76. So the 12-inch single didn't exist when I was born. Well, first of all, that makes me feel fucking old.
Join the club, mate.
But, you know, and you've got the commercial dominance of disco. So Donna Summer's I Feel Love, I would argue, is an electro tune. You've got the rise of punk, you've got new wave, you've got synth pop, you've got the first rap records in 1979 with Rapper's Delight. Rapper's Delight's often cited as the first, but it was actually beaten by Kim Tim III by the Fatback Band by a month or so. But whether or not you consider that, so you've got all this stuff going on, and all of them are in conversation with each other. All of these music, and you say, well, what's punk got to do with hip hop? Well, the Clash was so enamored by hip hop that they made a kind of an electro funk tune themselves. Punks used to go to Bambatta's DJ sets because I guess what they had in common was the idea that this was countercultural.
Exactly, and it's that kind of homemade, self-made kind of thing as well, isn't it? I think.
So you've got all this stuff. So yeah, and you know, and then overseas we've got things like Italian disco or Italo disco, which
big part of it.
Big part, and space disco, and you know, you've got all this stuff going on. So the idea that you can just locate it in one source, one point, is just a fool's errand. Although I'm sure many people have their own ideas about the first.
So where would we go for? So you've talked about the Cat Stevens track. Is this a good segue to talk about maybe Magic Fly, for example?
So Magic Fly is one of those tracks. I mean, it's from a band called Space. They're a French disco band. And what happened with disco from the Studio 54 Saturday Night Fever era, where everyone starts to hate disco, which is, it's just an overgeneralization. Disco is still being made and produced in the 80s in America and still being played in clubs. So the idea that disco died is nonsense. And what did disco turn into? House music. House music is an electronic form of disco. You've got that 4 on the floor beat. You've got the bumps. I mean, every time, even if I walk into a nightclub now, I'm guaranteed to hear that groove, right?
Yeah.
It just gets people on the feet. But space are very important, I think. Magic Fly is the one that a lot of people talk about. Phil Klein and Kurt Bagley mentioned this. And there's a lot of other space disco at the time where people would dress up like astronauts in the music videos and stuff. It was very futuristic. I'm not saying it's an electro track, but I'm saying it's part of the conversation. And I think it's very important.
Sure.
Just as Giorgio Moroder's. And in fact, Kurt told me that Kraftwerk were inspired by Giorgio Moroder's album from 1978, which has Faster Than the Speed of Love on.
Right.
Another track. So you've
right.
And I'm sure Moroder is inspired by Kraftwerk as well. So you've got this kind of it's like a game of volleyball.
Yeah, exactly. It's just toing and throwing the whole time.
I've started to use for people who are more into heavy metal and stuff and rock, like some of my friends. I say, well, people always talk about Black Sabbath's first album being the first heavy metal album, but I might agree with that, being a big Black Sabbath fan. But you also have Zeppelin before them. You have Blue Cheer doing Summertime Blues with a distorted guitar and stuff. So, you know, it's the first of everything always makes me feel a little bit squeamish.
Yeah, it's too simple, isn't it?
It's too simple. It needs a bit more nuance.
is Dave Clark, and you're listening to Bass Agenda.
As a Bronx DJ, Africa Bambaataa was certainly the most eclectic. But yes, he spun funk and soul records like Kool Herc, but he also played rock and metal. He played Culture Club, Yazoo, Michael Jackson, Billy Squier, the B-52s, Rolling Stones, and of course electronic music like Kraftwerk, Yellow Magic Orchestra, and Gary Newman. And in many ways, it's this multicultural attitude that Bambaataa brought to Planet Rock. A track that draws upon European music. The bongos in Planet Rock are taken from Babe Ruth's The Mexican, massive track for Kool Herc, and the B-Boys in the Bronx. But a band that comes from Hertfordshire in the UK.
Yeah.
So you've got this kind of cultural mix. But Gary Newman's metal from the album The Pressure Principle, I've chosen this track because it's not Cars. Everyone's heard Cars. Everyone knows Cars. Cars was massive in the Bronx, you know, which always strikes me as really strange, but you know, it's a great tune. I think that album's fantastic. What's interesting about Gary Newman in this time is he is using electronic music, but his drums are still live.
That's right. It's a hybrid kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of this admixture of the two. And Metal is the song that Bambaataa would play quite a lot, and actually covered on a later album, and had Gary Newman on vocals with him. So it's a very important track for the development of electro funk, freestyle, and all of that.
Yeah. Still touring. I think I saw a tour advertised recently for Gary Newman.
Yeah, I haven't seen him, but I would really like to, because I think I like all his music, to be fair. In the 80s, he went a little bit funny later on, but Gary Newman is kind of a poster child for what happened, how the music press responded to electronic music. And he was abused really badly, to the point that he was made quite unwell by it. Because as far as people were concerned, electronic music is not music. You just plug in a synthesizer and press go.
Yeah. They think it's there's no talent involved.
Everyone who makes electronic music, it's not that easy. No, you have to still have, you have to program beats, you have to have musical understanding of key and all that type, even if you do it organically. So it's always been just a myth.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gary Newman is a fantastic figure, and
I had a track cropped up recently, and I can't remember which guest it was that chose it, but I think it was is it Down in the Park?
Oh, it's fantastic.
I mean, that's just brilliant, amazing.
The Foo Fighters covered that song.
Did they? I didn't know that.
I mean, it probably sounds good to someone who hasn't heard the original, but there's something about the original that's quite dark and menacing.
It's quite sinister vibe to it, yeah.
And I think that about some early electro tunes. I mean, something like Nucleus always seemed to me to be quite optimistic and positive. But something like, I mean, even something like Egypt by Egyptian Lover, there's something about that's not quite right.
Yeah,
and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a kind of freaky way. Like it's just
kind of an eerie. There's a couple of synth sounds in there, and I'm just trying to think.
There's something dark about some electro that I find that, because I'm always going to gravitate towards that more than optimism.
Yeah.
There's something, and the Johnson crew as well. There's something that Pack Jam. It's just like something not quite right with that. There's something off.
Yeah.
And talking about the Johnson crew. There's a video online of them doing Pack Jam. Look out for the OVC. They're all dressed up in like astronauts with space gear and doing robot movements and stuff, and obviously miming to the vocoder. But if you watch a video by one of the space disco bands, you'll find that very, very similar in terms of the way that they dress. So it's this idea of the future.
course, we've got to talk about Ryuichi Sakamoto, particularly given his recent death, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the reason why I've picked Riot and Lagos, I picked it actually before we heard that Ryuichi Sakamoto had died over the weekend, sadly.
Yeah.
But he deserves as much credit as Kraftwerk, I think, and the Yellow Magic Orchestra. And I know that might be contentious, but Riot and Lagos is the first electronic tune, the first tune to use a Roland 808. And the Roland 808 is massively important to the electro sound, although I would add, not everyone used an Electro 8. In fact, 808 Beats by Unknown DJ doesn't use an 808, which is very strange.
Is that right?
Yeah, world-class wrecking crew.
Oh, I didn't know that.
World-class wrecking crew like the DMX.
Right.
But it's the Roland 808 that's on Riot in Lagos by Ryuichi Sakamoto, and it's a really offbeat, weird track. But I think we can certainly hear the strains of electro, if not full electro.
This is Frankie Bones, and you're listening to Bass Agenda.
Why I picked Body Mechanic by Quadrant 6 is that it's produced by John Roby. And John Roby's, you can hear John Roby's keyboards all over the track. But what's interesting about it is it's an electro track that I was unaware of. And that's because the Street Sounds compilation albums were so big.
Yeah.
Especially the early ones, and these were being chucked out every 3 months or so.
Yeah.
And they were so popular that they even hit the charts at the time.
Yeah.
But obviously there was a lot more music out there than what was contained on those albums, and there was no internet. So how would you find out about them? Well, people would go to record stores. Phil Klein told me that he would just get in touch with people from certain labels and say, what have you got? Send me this. And sometimes it wouldn't be electro.
Yeah.
But other times he would end up with a gem.
Yeah.
So he just wanted more of this stuff. For me in Sunderland, with hardly any money at all, it wasn't like I learned from other people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that clearly slip through the net. E.T. Bookie by the E.T.s, which I think if was more popular might have got them sued, because there's kind of an E.T. voice in there going, phone home and ouch.
Yeah.
He hurts his finger.
It's not just the style of the voice, the actual words
just the style of the voice.
lifted, directly lifted.
Probably not a sample, but you know, but you know, to digress a little bit, the E.T.s and E.T. Boogie clearly demonstrates the impact of science fiction cinema on music and vice versa.
Oh God, yeah,
that they're doing that. But that track was new to me. Greg Wilson told me about that track.
Oh right, okay.
E.T. found house. E.T. found house.
But Body Mechanic by Quadrant 6 was something that Kurt Bagley and Phil Klein mentioned. And
the bass line's fantastic. I mean, it's so simple.
Yes,
but it's just.
But I can definitely imagine getting down on this track when I'm a young'un.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Leave it overnight. I'll get the job done right. I'm your body mechanic.
Yo, this is the Egyptian Lover, and you're listening to the Bass Agenda Radio Show, baby.
Leave it overnight. I'll get the job done right.
When I get involved in a research project, I become obsessed. And that's because you have to become obsessed and become part of it. For me, I'm not talking about anyone else, but for me, I have to live it.
Makes sense.
So when I've written things about comic books before, I would spend days and days just poring over comic books to be part of that, to become a fan. I was already a fan of Electro.
Yeah, that's good.
There is no way in the world I will ever have the same amount of knowledge as people like Phil and Kurt Bagley.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Probably other people in the community, like I'm interviewing Andy Jaggers next week.
Yeah, good.
He's another one. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mine this knowledge from the community in order that I capture and document the history as accurately as possible. And that's the thing about a research project like this. It's really reliant upon people interviewing people, learning about their experiences, but people like Andy Jaggers, Kurt Bagley, Phil Klein, the Dexicist, these are the people who are the archives of electro history, and it's my job to kind of to cut their heads off and say, give me your knowledge.
I love what you're doing. At one level, I'm immensely jealous because you're getting paid to do this. I wish I could if I could make a living doing Bass Agenda, I'd be the happiest man alive. But yeah, I think it's so important to capture this stuff. I mean, there's people in my archive now that have unfortunately passed away, and that you cannot hear their voices anywhere else. It's a real honour to have that in the archive, and I think it's so important.
But I think we're at a stage now where, like I'm not wishing anyone dead. No. But if we go like much further without capturing and documenting these voices, these pioneers, we might lose that. very important part of history, regardless of what anyone thinks about the genre.
Yeah.
And you know, I still find myself thinking that electro should be under the umbrella of hip hop, but I'm not sure about, like, there's a lot of branches and tentacles, and electro today is it's just so widespread, and it's different and it's unique. And a big part of a project like this, of course, is reading. I mean, I've read probably around 50 books over the last 6 months or so. That might even just be tangentially related. So, you know, I've been reading books about Parliament and Funkadelic. There's a book by Ricky Vincent, who there's only really one book that's been published on funk, which is bizarre. And he does talk about electro at the end, and he does talk about the connections with funk. Yeah, I think if you were a person, if I tried to write it as a history that was chronological, that wouldn't be possible, because by 1982, 83, you've got things happening in different parts of the States, especially, but also in Europe. So you've got so what I was thinking of structuring the book is by region. So start off with New York. I don't just want to write a list of key tracks. That's not what I want to do.
No.
But I think throughout the book, what I'll have is little boxes that'll have key tracks, producers, instruments used and stuff, because I always ask, like I asked Dave Stowes in Egyptian Lover, so on Egypt, what instruments, what was used, and then I can put them in the book so people can understand how these things were made.
I like that, and I like the fact that you're looking at the context, the cultural context, I suppose, when this music was being made. You know, what was going on around at the same time.
And we haven't even spoken about Miami bass.
No, my God, and that's
so Miami bass is certainly a strand of electro. So I mean, this book sounds like it's getting bigger and bigger.
Obviously, you want a lot of participation in this if you can. So you want to interview a lot of people who've played their role. But how can, you know, the wider audience maybe get involved?
I would say if anyone was a b-boy, a b-girl at the time, if you were an MC, if you were a breakdancer and you listened to electro music and it was a part of your upbringing in the 80s, then please get in touch. I'd love to hear your story. I'm trying to capture as many as possible. I'm going to be interviewing hundreds of people, hopefully. You can get in touch at Proctor at bournemouth.ac.uk, and my name is spelled Proctor.
Cool. And I'll put that in the show notes and so on as well for you as well. And then presumably you'd like, I guess, you're going to feature some photos, images in this, maybe?
I mean, if people want to share images and photos that can kind of illustrate their story and stuff, that would be fantastic. I definitely want photos and images. But what I'm not interested in is contemporary electro. That's a different book.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah.
But the most people who do contemporary electro tend to be someone who was active in the DS, the older generation anyway.
Take
Great chat with Dr. Proctor there. Really excited about this project, and we'll speak to him again at some point in the future when the book's taken a bit more shape. Just a reminder of his email address if you want to get in touch with any stories, thoughts, pictures relating to the old school electro days, particularly here in the UK. It's B Proctor, so that's BPROCTOR at Bournemouth, which is of course BOURNEMOUTH.ac.uk. B Proctor at Bournemouth.ac.uk. Working title of the book is And the Beat Goes Boom, The History of Electro Hip-Hop. About time somebody did this. Nearly time for ADJ's Old School Mix. Just a brief mention, because I don't think I've mentioned it for a couple of shows. If you can support Bass Agenda, help me keep the archive online and all the various subscriptions and whatnot I need to keep this thing alive, keep this thing going. I'll be really grateful of your support via patreon.com/bassagenda. That's patreon.com/bassagenda. From around $4, around £4 a month, you can contribute to this mission. Plus, you get early access to shows, exclusive merch in some cases, discounts on Bass Agenda recordings, voice-free versions of the show, and extra mixes as well. That's patreon.com/bassagenda. Coming up, ADJ in the mix.
This is ADJ and you are listening to Bass Agenda.
Eat 'em up, yum yum, eat 'em up, yum yum, eat.
is Detroit's filthiest, and you're listening to the #1 underground bass agenda.
systems for defense, sophisticated weapons, suspicious governments, high-tech surveillance on the street and in the stores. It's 1984 and there's a threat of nuclear war.
Your man's body mechanic coming straight from the basement in Detroit. And you're listening to Bass Agenda. You suckers, suckers, suckers.
Everybody come along and let's leave this boring USA. Egypt is a place to be where all the lovers play. Little girl, you think you're fine, stars from Hollywood. Matched up to the women in Egypt, you never could look that good. Everybody come along and let's leave this boring USA. Egypt is a place to be where all the lovers play. Little girl, you think you're fine, stars from Hollywood. Matched up to the women in Egypt, you never could look that good.
Do not attempt.
The possessors of the ancient Tibetan hold you all as hopeless prisoners for our experiments.
We will control the bass. We will control the treble. We can change the sound waves from piercing highs to thundering lows. For the next few minutes, your mind, body, and soul will be unavoidably infiltrated by the almighty supernatural powers of the Tibetan Jam. At this very moment, our special molecular heat waves are being transferred into your body by means of the dance floor and the speakers. As your body temperature rises, you will notice it will begin to pulsate in unison with the beat of the music, a normal reaction. At this time, males and females should, by all means, not refrain from moving closer, closer, closer to the speakers to receive the total energy of the Tibetan Jam.
Takes you into a seemingly trance-like state of mind, it is highly recommended that you cooperate with the feeling to move and dance. Many have attempted to fight the rhythmic powers of the Tibetan Jam by standing absolutely still. Not recommended.
I will not dance.
I don't want to dance.
Well, maybe I'll dance a little.
I'll dance.
I'm dancing.
I'm dancing.
I can't stop my feet.
This maneuver is not safe and will cause a definite overload of Tibetan heat waves. Lack of motion could prove fatal. Dance! Dance, you fool! Dance! Faster! Faster! Dance! We now return to you control of the airways. We, possessors of the Tibetan theory, believe all that are can jam, all that is can move. So we are constantly searching for subjects who do not respond to the music,
so that we can bring them to our laboratories and use them as disco lab specimens, so that we may run many and more elaborate tests and experiments.
Our agents are among you. Beware. But this could never happen to you, cause you're dancing, right?
Here's your chance. Now dance. Here's your chance. Here's your chance. Now dance.
Awesome mix from ADJ. Love and thanks out to him. Really did us proud there. Make sure to keep an eye on him, keep an eye on Pyramid Transmissions, his radio show, and of course awesome label as well. Thanks again out to Dr Proctor. Looking forward to seeing how that thing shapes up. The full show and track list will be available first to supporters of the show on Patreon, patreon.com/bassagenda, and it'll be added to the other archive on SoundCloud, etc. at some point next week. I'll be back next month with another show. Could be one of 3 possible guests. Just waiting to see which one comes back to me first with their tracks. Keep an eye on Bass Agenda socials and the website bassagenda.co.uk for information. Until next time, thanks for supporting the show. Hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good weekend. Cheers.
Yo, this is DJ Digital. Thanks again for checking out Andy on the Bass Agenda Show. 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 Bass Agenda Show.